Yeah, so I will be playing Land by Muramatsu. I've been working on this since about halfway through this summer, and I finally got it to like a good speed, I think, and worked out all like the accuracy errors. So this is my second time performing it for Masterclass, so hopefully it goes a little better than last time. Yeah.
Some of you have heard this before, some of you haven't. Any comments?
Your tone in the low register of marimba is absolutely beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, it's come a long way. I think you know that. So this piece is just so beautiful, and I think one thing that really is nice about it is that you hear the melody very clearly throughout. And first of all, your note accuracy was like definitely better than last week. Not to say last week was like bad, I'm really not, but like it was very solid. But as far as the melody goes, like, I think be careful because it's so clear and like it's so catchy. Like you can hear that melody like just stand out above all the rest, which it should. But that means it's even more dangerous if you aren't fluid with how you sort of create that melody and like kind of just trans.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So like, I don't know if it was like where you were on the bar in a few spots, or maybe it's just some like slight like rhythmic inconsistencies, but like I felt like there were like two spots where it staggered a little bit, and it kind of like took me out like, oh man, because you know the piece is like, it's so awesome, it's like so beautiful, so like just this little like, and then you were just right back into it, but yeah, just like to watch out for it.
Thank you.
I thought like your dynamic shaping and phrasing was really good, and I got really immersed in it just like watching you play. Like I looked down at your feet for a minute and I was like, this guy's like dancing down there. It was really cool.
Thank you.
Cello.
Because it may have really said, but I liked the like choreography of your phrasing. It's very like in there. I can tell you've practiced it a lot with the phrasing, so you can't like not do that.
Thank you.
But like the very last couple bars, especially with the chords and how like the time you took to get those chords and like basically with, like all the phrasing just like point those out and like how you ended it was like beautiful.
That's interesting that several of you mentioned, what was going on there. You know, all of the percussionists have heard it again and again, that what happens with our feet, what happens with our legs and knees, all of that is directly related to our ability to be accurate, to be expressive, to have the right sounds on the instrument, and that was really interesting. So, you know, we certainly, Jack and I talked about this last year, like certain pieces want the marimba to be higher or lower. Don't think of yourself as being a number 4 player. It's rep to rep, it depends on the piece of music, and even with this lower setting, Derek was still up on his toes to get either the sound that he wanted or the reach that he wanted at various times. And so it's a whole body sport, just like playing the cello. It's not about like from here up, right? I mean, that's like nothing happens there. It's the whole thing. And so the more mindful we are of our own bodies, I think the more choices we have musically, right? And I felt like you were like painting with all the colors. The accuracy was really outstanding. And I loved also, I want to say how when we go into the triple meter, the triplets, and so we have that tempo rubato espressivo is the indication, and it's funny, we were talking about how when we get new pieces, we often will go to YouTube first and hear how do people do it, how do they phrase it, what do they do, but that can take the place of our own creative process, and it can be really destructive. And Derek did a deep dive about like really being faithful to the page, and then deciding how to Derikify this, you know what I mean? And it's funny because I rarely feel like I hear recordings that actually do rubato there. And I feel like, yeah, I could hear you kind of pushing forward a little bit and pulling back. It was subtle. You could even do more, but it was really original and very beautiful. So
Thank you.
Did you have any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that the sense of rubato overall, I mean, it's really lovely and convincing. I actually kind of had a question, which is, well, I've got lots of questions, but I'll just ask one. How do you deal with and investigate repetition?
You mean like repeated phrases over and
Yeah.
over again? So yeah, kind of like that triplet section we were just talking about. It's like the same 2 bars just repeated over and over again. What I'm trying to do in this case, like, so it's phrasing, so it's crescendo up for a bar and a half, and then crescendo down for 2 bars or something. What I'm trying to do is not make them all sound exactly the same. So maybe I'm like pushing in, like speeding up, going crescendoing, and then slowing down the next time. And then halfway through that, I like modulate it to a different key, and I try to approach it differently. But maybe I'll slow down as I crescendo. Just try to like make them.
And how do you make those choices?
It kind of changes every time I play it. Sometimes it's just the way I'm feeling, and like this is what I want to portray right now in this moment. And then sometimes it's like defined, beforehand. So it all depends sometimes. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think live performance means that we are reacting to what we're like experiencing in that moment, right? But you know, we have to look to the language of the music And I mean, this is ultimately a pretty classical piece, right? I mean, it's not like Beethoven, but there's classical harmonies, and it's kind of doing, the language feels classical in the sense that the way that phrases are structured, like there's a rhetoric to what we're trying to say when we say something twice. And so I tell students, like, you can't just decide, oh, I'm gonna do it differently the second time, or if there's a repeat, I'm gonna do it differently. Because that feels arbitrary, right? If I have to repeat myself, like, I'm saying the same words, but I'm trying to get a different effect. So I think if you try to think of this in terms of the English language, right? Just think about why you have to say it the same time, the same way, the same thing again. And you're right, sometimes one note change of harmony will completely change the effect of the words, but sometimes you don't have a change at all, right? And that's when you can, I don't want to say predetermine, but you can decide what the paragraph is supposed to be saying, and so that we don't have unrelated sentence that just feels like we're reacting in the moment to.
It's just like continuous like musical conversation kind of.
Yeah, and there's a logic to it. That's the thing. It's like, I think we need to create internal logic in a big piece. And so just thinking, I mean, repetition is just one example of how that happens. Like ends of phrases, like how do we move from a single word to a sentence to a paragraph to an essay? I don't know, whatever you would want to call the whole piece, right? If we end the sentence the same way every time, even if it's beautiful, we get bored. Or if we don't acknowledge the end of a paragraph in a different way than the end of a sentence, it loses some of that structural meaning. So, I mean, you're like 98% there, but now it's the final 2% that is often the hardest, right? But you can explore some of those ideas about why you're doing the timing that you're doing, and tighten that up, like make concrete decisions, because actually making decisions beforehand, it gives you more freedom in the moment. We're maybe choosing from a smaller subset of choices, but the choices that we can make then make more logical sense and make a more cohesive whole for the final presentation.
That makes sense, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for playing.
Yeah.